Today's daf Bezos Hashem is Masechta Avodah Zarah Daf Tesvav, and we're going to begin on that Tesvav Yudalit Amid Beis, just right after the Mishnah. Mishnah just got through saying that there was a custom in some places that they did not sell small animals to goyim. Some places they didn't sell a small animal to goyim, and if you live in that place, you have to follow that custom of the place that you're living in. So it's a custom. So the Gemara asks the memra, do you want to say the isura leka min haga hu deika, that there's no iser to sell a small animal to a guy. A small animal, let's say, is a sheep or a goat, but it's a minig, but there's no iser to sell an animal to a guy. Now, why would there be an iser? So we'll explain that in a minute. Wherever there was a custom not to sell, don't sell. Wherever there was a custom to sell an animal to a guy, a small animal to a guy, nuhug, that's the custom. Uraminu. So I'm going to ask you a stira that from this brisa, it's going to say that one is never allowed to sell an animal to a guy. Why? One's not allowed to store an animal in a barn of a guy. Let's say you're a guest at his hotel, and you're putting your animal in his stall as you're staying at his hotel. You're not allowed to do that. Goyim are generally a chashud on we accuse them that they're going to sodomize the animal, and that is to sleep with the animal, and that's therefore you're not allowed to make your animal available for a guy to do a big aveir with. A guy can only do part of the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. He's supposed to only sleep with a woman and not to do arroyas, and including in the arroyas is sleeping with an animal. So if that's the case, if we're always accusing a guy for sleeping with animals, so then it should be always, you should always have an isser for selling a small animal to a guy, because you're going to sell him a sheep, he's going to sleep with the sheep. So therefore, why does the Mishnah say that it was only a minhag to sell there was only a minhag, and in some places there was that you were allowed to sell animal to guy, but look, let us assume that one should not be allowed, never allowed to be sell an animal to a guy, because he's going to sleep with the animal. And says the Gemara, Rav said, Shehitiru limkar, hitiru liyachid. Wherever they allowed you to sell to a guy, then they permitted you to actually have the guy stay with the animal privately. In other words, our Mishnah that allowed some places to sell an animal to a guy was also of the opinion that in some places the goyim were not sleeping with animals. The goyim were not sodomizing animals. So therefore, they allowed you to sell, and they also would allow the goy to be alone with the animal. But the brisa that we said, Eima midim behema bipun shel goyim, is makom she'asul yachid. That's a place that they asked you to bring your animal to be alone with the guy. So then they would be of the opinion asur limkol. They would be not, you're not prohibited to sell to a guy. So really, it's one of the same. If you accuse goy, not every place goyim were accused of sleeping with the animals. So therefore, in the places that they were accused, therefore we prohibited you to sell to a guy. But if it was a place where they were okay, they didn't sleep with the animals, then it was permitted to sell to a guy. That's what the Gemara just said. We go now to we go to the next page. Daf Tesvav Amaral. Says the Gemara. That's the Gemara's first teretz. So they're one of the same. If you hold that you're not allowed to be miyachid, to be alone with the animal, you're also not allowed to sell to the animal. Rab Laza says differently. Even in places where you're not allowed to sell, you're not allowed to bring your animal to be alone with the guy, but nevertheless, mutter limkar, you would be allowed to sell to the guy. You would be allowed to sell to the guy. So it's not connected. My tama, what would be the difference? Answers the Gemara, it's a very big difference. If it's your animal, the guy has no problem sodomizing that animal. But if it's the guy's animal, if you sold it to the guy, he's not going to sodomize the animal. Goy chos al behemtoi shloi teyaka. The guy is concerned about his own animal, that he shouldn't make it sterile. In other words, if he would sleep with the animal would not be able to bear forth calves and young. So therefore, it's going to cause him a loss. So he's not going to sleep with the animal. Yaf Rav Hadabe. Rav also retracted. They're not one of the same. Rav Goy Chos Al Behemtoi Shaloi Tiaka. Goy is concerned about his animal. Shaloi Tiaka, not to make it sterile, not to make the animal sodomize the animal, so that the animal cannot have offspring. And because of that, maybe it would be usher to be miyachid and your animal with the guy, but nevertheless, you'll be permitted to sell to the guy. Nevertheless, the Mishnah said, you're not allowed to sell a large animal to a guy. So the Gemara says, my Tama, what's the reason? We're not concerned that he's going to sodomize the animal, because you just got through saying if it's he owns the animal, he's not going to want to damage the animal, making it unable to have children. So, but it's still your animal, and you're going to cause it to do work. Your animals, if you sold it to the guy, it's still your animal, and you have a din that your animal is not allowed to do work on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, V'nevad, Kevin de Zabana Kanya. The Gemara's question is, of course, why not? Why can't you do work on Shabbos? Why can't you sell it to the guy? And even if it does work on the Shabbos, it's the guy's animal, and guy is not commanded to rest on Shabbos, and his animal certainly. And says the Gemara, Gezer mishum she'ela mishum sechirus, like we spoke out in the Mishnah, is the concern is that you may loan the animal or you may rent the animal, whereby it's still your animal. And if you do that to the guy, he's going to work the animal on Shabbos, and you're going to be in violation because it's still your animal. Says the Gemara, She'ela Kanya, Ba'agra Kanya. When you rent an animal, the guy owns the animal during the period of the rental. When you lend an animal to a guy, since he's chayiv on all mishaps that can happen to the animal, it's really he owns the animal, so it's a guy's animal that's working on Shabbos. So what's the problem? Ella Amma Rami Bereid Rabbi Yaiva. Rabbi Rami said to Rami, the son of Rabbi Yaiva, said like this: Gezerah Mishum Nis Yoinei, testing the animal. There is an isser for me as a Jew to cause an animal to carry a load on Shabbos, even if it's not my animal. So here's the case. You're going to sell the animal very close to sunset on Erev Shabbos. So it's really whose animal? It's the goy's animal. The goy is going to say to you, let's test it out. So he's going to put a load on the animal, and you're going to make a sound. It's going to hear your sound. But also, it's going to go. The animal is going to move and carry the load because of the sound of the yid. He's going to cause the animal to walk, and this animal belongs to the guy. But nevertheless, who's causing the animal to work on Shabbos? That's the yid. The yid wants him that the animal should go. It's leading an animal on Shabbos, and behemta is not just your animal. Any animal, even if it's not your animal, if you cause it to carry a load on Shabbos, you're chayiv. If you cause an animal to work on Shabbos, leading it to carry something on Shabbos, you're chayiv a korban chaskas. So the Gemara gave you the reason of testing. That's the reason why you're not allowed to sell a big animal, because you sold it to him, but he's going to make you test it on Erev Shabbos, and you're going to cause the yid's going to cause the animal to carry a load on Shabbos to prove that the animal is a healthy animal and follows directions. But I'm not worried if the animal does if you rent it to a guy and he does work on it, because really that's not my problem. It's the goy's animal that's doing the work on Shabbos. Maskiv Lord of Shesha B'derei Rav Idi, who's Chiris Mikanya, when you rent an animal to a goy, does he acquire it? Well, to now we learned to the Mishnah, in a, in Eretz Yisrael, you're not supposed to sell property to a guy. Also, Gzeira, don't rent him a property because you might come to sell it. But even Chutz La'aretz, which we allowed you to rent to a guy, don't rent it out so he can live there. Rent it out for him to store, his wood there. Because if you rent it out to living there, that's also he's bringing in his avodah zarah into your house. So you're renting your house, and now you're going to be violate the law of loisavi to evil. You're not allowed to bring an avodah zarah into your house. So don't rent to a guy. That's what the Brisa says. That's what the Mishnah says. If you are of the opinion, that renting an animal, renting acquires it. So if the guy rents it, it's as if he owns it. High kikam ayel. When the guy is going to bring the avodah zarah into his house, into that house that he rented, the beisa kama ayel. He's bringing it into his own house. So what's the problem? So must be that schiris is loikanya. That renting, he doesn't really own it. It's still considered your house. So we see schiris is loikanya. Schiris doesn't acquire it. So that's the question. The question is, if schiris loikanya, what's the whole problem? What did you have a whole thing that there wouldn't be a problem of renting your animal to a goy? It's a big problem. It's your animal. It's going to be doing work on Shabbos. And says the Gemara, concludes the Gemara, Shanu Avodah Zarah Dechemirin. Really, when you rent your house, rent your apartment to a guy, it really belongs to the guy. Nevertheless, I'm very concerned that I don't want you to bring Avodah Zarah into a house that once belonged to you, or because it's eventually coming back to you. Because when the term of the rental is up, it's coming back to you. And we're going strict on Avodah Zarah. The pasuk says, don't bring something abomination into your house. So that's why, really, the bottom line is, if he rents it, the guy acquires it. But it's because of the Chumrah Avodah Zarah. I don't want you to rent to a guy an apartment because he's going to bring the his avodah zarah into his house. Maskef Lord of Yeska Breder of Sharshia Meschiris Mikanya does again. The bar is nailing that. When you rent something, do you own it? When you rent something, you don't really own it. But now we learn to the Mishnah. Yisrael Shasacha Paramekoin Yachilenu Kashine Truma. Yisrael that rented a par from a kohen. So who owns the cow? The kohen. The Yisrael just rents it. So if the Yisrael had an inheritance from his mother's father, who was a kohen, some animal food, which is truma, he can give it to that. He can give it to that animal. And here the opposite: the kohen shesocha par Yisrael, a kohen that rented a cow from a Jew. Even though the Jew is responsible, even though the kohen is responsible to feed the animal, he shouldn't give him animal food of truma because it's not the kohen's animal. It's really the Yisrael's animal. Why can't the kohen who rented the cow from the Jew feed the Jewish cow animal food of truma because it's paradidei? It's his cow. It's the kohen's cow now because he's renting it. From here we prove schiris like Kanya. When you rent something, you don't own it. That's it. So now, it all gets back. Now that you say schiris loy Kanya, so why can't I sell a big animal to a guy? So I have a perfect answer. I have 3 reasons. I'm not allowed to sell a big animal to a guy, gzeira mishum schiris, a gzeira that I might rent the animal to a guy, and therefore my animal would be doing work on Shabbos. Gzeira mishum she'ela, or it's a gzeira that instead of selling it, I'm going to lend him the animal. And again, schiris and she'ela are not koina, so it's going to be my animal that's working on Shabbos. And gzeira mishum nisyayin. And the third reason why you don't sell a large animal to a guy It's because of testing. And even if you did sell it to him, the guy is going to make you want to test out the animal. You're going to cause the animal to carry something on Shabbos. So three reasons why you shouldn't be selling a large animal to a guy. Says the Gemara. Rav Ada Shara lezabuni chamra aida desaf seira. Rav Ada permitted to sell a Jewish guy to sell. He's a broker and he's a middleman, and he's selling a Jewish donkey to a guy, but it's not his donkey. He's just an agent selling the Jewish donkey to the guy. If you have the problem of testing it out, the broker doesn't own the animal, so certainly testing. He's not going to be the one testing the animal because the animal doesn't know his voice to move according because of him. The broker may lend the animal or rent the animal. Even the lav today, it's not his animal. He's not going to rent it and not going to lend it. Well, he never wants to do that. He just wants to get a sale done. You only make a commission if you make a sale. And he's not going to lend it to somebody to use it temporarily. So the guy shouldn't find out any blemishes with the animal. So he wants to do a sale, and he's a broker. And therefore, all your concerns are not a problem. So via a broker, it would be permitted to sell to a guy. Maskif law. So now the Gemara continues of Huna Zabinahu para legai. Huna sold a para to a guy. Amalei Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said, "My time of marhachi. Why are you selling a cow to a guy? It's a large animal. Our Mishnah says you're not allowed to sell a large animal to a guy." Amalei. So Huna told Rav Chizda, "I don't know why he's going to use the animal. Maybe the guy is buying the animal to slaughter and eat it. So he's not going to work with the animal. So all your questions, the animal's not going to do malach on Shabbos. He's not going to do malach on Shabbos. So therefore, I'm permitted to. When did our Mishnah say that you're not allowed to sell a large animal to a guy if you know he's going to do work with the animal? If he bought it to do work, but if he bought it like a donkey, or if he bought a kosher animal, but he says he's going to keep it around. But if you don't know, you can assume that maybe he's not even going to keep the animal around. He's not going to do work. He bought the animal to slaughter. We go to Tezvava Mebeis. How do I know you say something like that? Now we learned in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai says, you're not allowed to sell a cow that does plowing on Shemitah. Beisilo matir, and Beisilo says you're allowed to. Why? You can slaughter it. So I'm allowed to sell an animal, even though this guy might be somebody who's going to do work on Shemitah, but I don't know why. Maybe I'll sell him the animal because I can assume that he's going to slaughter the animal, not do work with it on Shemitah. So that's the same idea. We paskin like Beis Hillel, and if there's a leniency that I can say, hey, maybe he's not buying the animal to do work, I'm allowed to sell him the animal. Amar Rabba says, be dummy. How can you compare to Beis Hillel's case of selling a plowing cow to a guy who's going to do work on Shemitah to this case? Hassam over there ain't Adam Mitzubal Shvisas Behemta Beshviyas. I'm selling the animal to a guy, to a Jew that's going to do work on Shemitah, right? He's going to do work on Shemitah. So what? Hacha. So I'm not commanded that my animal shouldn't do work on Shemitah. Hacha over here, by the case of renting it to a guy, selling it to a guy, Adam. Adam, a person is commanded on to command on his as his animal shouldn't do work on Shabbos. So that's what the Gemara says. No, big difference. You shouldn't have sold that animal to a goy, because still I'm commanded that my animal shouldn't do work on Shabbos. So Rav Huna should not have sold that animal. Amalei Abaya said, when a person himself is commanded not to do something, you're not allowed to sell. Soda, a field. If it's your field, you have to make sure that nobody's going to work that field in Shemitah. Utna, we learned in the Mishnah, Beishami says, one is not allowed to sell an unplowed field in Shemitah. Beis Hillel says that you could sell it to a person who's choshud al shvius. He might do work, because I can assume that, wait, he's going to, he might not do Shemitah. He's going to leave it for after Shemitah. So the Gemara wants to get that straight. So therefore, getting back to our case, according to this understanding, one would be permitted to sell it to a goy, that big animal to a goy, if I can assume that maybe he's going to buying it for slaughtering. Ask if Rav Ashi asked back, if you're not commanded to do something, it's permitted to sell. If the item itself, you have no command on it, you have no responsibility, it's permitted to sell. Very kale. Plain vessels, tools that are used to plow an animal, to work a field. They know the mitzvah al shvisas kelim b'shviyas. A person is not commanded that your tools should not work on shmita. Now we learned in the Mishnah, Eileheina kelim she'ein odom reshoy lemoichem b'shmitz. These following are the tools you're not allowed to sell on shmita. Hamachresha v'kol kalel, a plow with all its tools. Ha'oil, the yoke. V'hamizra, the thing that does the winnowing. V'hadeker, hadeker is a hoe. So all these things you're not allowed to sell. Now, why can't I sell it to somebody on Shemitah? Maybe he's not going to do work on Shemitah. Yet we say you're not going to sell it. Alama Rav gives you the rule. If I have a way to hang and say, wait, maybe he's buying it for something else, and therefore I'm allowed to sell it. Even though I'm commanded. So again, a cow, I can say, wait, maybe he's buying it for slaughtering. So therefore, I'm permitted to sell him a cow. I don't have to ask any questions. I'm permitted to sell him a field, because maybe he's buying a field now because he knows he can't always buy a field. So he's going to buy it now, but leave the field fallow throughout the Shemitah. I don't know for sure he's going to work on Shemitah. So I'm allowed to sell to any Jew a fallow field on Shemitah. But if I can't have any good reason, then I assume he's going to do something bad with it, even though he's not commanded. So therefore, tools, I'm not allowed to sell him work tools on Shemitah, because why is he buying work tools on Shemitah? You can always go to the hardware store and buy work tools after Shemitah, because he wants to use these tools and work on Shemitah. So since I have no other excuse for him, I'm not allowed to sell him those tools. Says the Gemara, Rabba Zabin Charma Yisra Chashuv Limko Legoy. Rabin sold a donkey to another Jew, but that Jew is accused that he's going to resell it to another guy. So Abai says, "My time of it, Marhachi. Why did you do such a thing?" Amalei. So Rabbi said, "I know the Yisrael Zabin. I sold it to a Jew." Amalei. So Rabbi said, "Well, also Zabin Legoy. He's going to sell it to a guy." And again, you're not allowed to sell to a guy. So you're selling to a Jew, but you know that Jew is going to sell it to a guy. So, Lagoy kamazabin, Yisrael loy kamazabin. So Rabba said, I know for sure he's going to resell it to another guy. Maybe he's going to sell it to another Jew. Does he only sell to goyim? Maybe he can sell to another Jew. So since I'm not 100% sure, so Rabba permitted himself to resell the the item to a guy, to this Jew, even though there's a possibility he's going to resell the donkey to a guy. Esavei. So the Gemara asks a question. Some places they said don't sell to a small animal, to a kusi, and they sell it. And some places they didn't sell it. A kusi is not a Jew, half Jew. It's a half Jew, half goy. It was like the Samaritans that um, after Sennacherib exiled the 10 tribes, he brought in Samaritans, and some of them became Jewish, but they only kept Torah Shabbat and not Torah Shabbat. So they were somewhat Jewish, but they only kept Torah Shabbat. Now, why can't I sell? Why would they sell? I'm not allowed to sell to a kusi, a small animal. Are you going to tell me that a small animal, a kusi, is going to sodomize? That's not true. My timer. You're going to say that we accuse them that they're going to sodomize an animal, a small animal. Are they accused to do that? We learned in the Mishnah, so mates in the Choram, the caves, in the caves. You know that the Ain't the caves says the Choram, and Choram mates in the caves. The Ain Moisen Behem, the Royish Lahem. They miachten in Mohem. They Moisen Lam Tinig Lam de Sefer Lam de Umnas. What the Brisa says, all these things you're not allowed to do to a goy. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to do to a goy. You're not allowed to be with a guy because he might kill you. You're not allowed to give your child to for him to be the teacher because he might teach the child the wrong things, and he might be involved in homosexuality with the child. And also, you don't bring your animals to a guy. Aval you're allowed to bring an animal to be with into the hotels belonging to a kusi. Zachar mates in the caves and cave eight Zachar. It doesn't matter. Zachar mates in the caves, eight in the caves. It doesn't matter who the owner, male or female, or the animal is male or female. Doesn't matter who the owner of the hotel is. Alma. So this proof, loy chashidi, they're not accused. So what the Gemara is going to say is, the Gemara is just now continued to say is that what we see from here is that a kusi is not going to sodomize an animal. So if that's the case, why was there some places that they did not allow you to sell a small animal to a kusi? The answer is because he's going to resell it to a guy. So that's the question. How did Rabbah sell an animal to a Jew if we know that that Jew is going to sell it to a guy? That's the question. By Tanya, we learned in another brisa. Ein moichel lehem lo yizayim ein mashchizim lehem azayim ein moichel lehem lo yisadam lo kolorim lo kavolim lo shalshal lo shalbaza echa goy vecha kusei. Now, we're not allowed to sell any type of weapons, any type of handcuffs, any type of foot cuffs or neck cuffs to a guy because it's and to a kusi because it might be used on a Jew. Now, my tam. Now, why can't they sell a weapon to a kusi? Are you going to say because a kusi is we concerned that he might kill a Jew? Akusim killers. We said you were allowed to be alone with a kusi as opposed to a guy. You can't be alone with a guy because he might kill you. But with a kusi, you wouldn't be allowed to be with him because he's not going to kill Ella. The problem with selling a weapon to a kusi, mishum de'asi lezabuni legoy, because he might sell to a guy. So we see from there that you're not allowed to sell to a kusi because he's going to sell to a guy. So the question is, how did Rabbah sell to a Jew who's eventually going to sell it to a guy, this large animal? Are you going to tell me that a kusi is going to for sure sell it to a guy? A Jew, he might do tshuva, and he might decide not to sell the large animal that he bought to a guy. Rabbi Bavu said it straight out. Just like we said, you're not allowed to sell a large animal to a guy. It's also not allowed to sell a large animal to a Jew who's going to sell it to a guy. So Rabbah did wrong. He paskined wrong. So the Gemara says, Roy Basrei Tlosa Parsai. He ran after him 3 miles. Vikidame Parsa Bechali, one parsa in sand. For like Adrach, he couldn't catch up with the Jew. He paskined wrong, and now he realized his mistake. He shouldn't have sold his animal to a Jew. That's going to sell it to a guy. He tried to catch the Jew that he sold it to, and he unfortunately did not catch the Jew. Amar Rav Dimi bar Abba, one final thing, Rav Dimi bar Abba said, Kederach, she'asur limka l'goy, asur limka l'istim Yisrael. Just like you're not allowed to sell a weapon to a guy, you're not allowed to sell a weapon to a Jewish robber. Says the Gemara, Hechidami. What kind of Jewish robber? If it's a type of robber, a mafia guy, a Jewish mafia guy that's going to kill people with it, pshita, of course you're not allowed to sell him a weapon. Haina goy, that's the same reason why you're not allowed to sell to a guy. If he doesn't kill people, amai loy, why not? And says the Gemara, he really doesn't kill. He's going to use it to defend himself. In other words, he steals people's money. Then people try to chase back to get their money. And in order to defend himself, he pulls a weapon out. The Zimlon Ovid Latzuli Nafshi, he's come to save himself. And by pulling the weapon out, they let him go. And therefore, you're causing a loss for the person that he stole from. So this weapon was not that he's going to kill, but this weapon is something that he's going to use to take people's money. I mean, you're causing a loss in other people's money. Because of that, therefore, you're not allowed to sell a weapon to a listim Yisrael.